My name is Stephen Frampton. I'm a predictive astrologer and psychic medium. It's an unusual combination, but I chose many years ago to integrate a really good analytical astrology into my practice. You know, mediumship is wonderful in that it enables us to connect with our loved ones and guides in spirit. It's something that is very real. There is no doubt that we continue to exist once we have exited the physical body, which is basically a shell, a carriage, a tool, a vehicle to utilize on the earth plane, but it's not what we are. We are consciousness. If you think of your feelings, your thoughts, your knowledge, your character, none of these are physical. So we're not physical beings, we are non-physical entities, spirit, and we incarnate at times onto the earth plane, which is a physical environment on which we require a physical body, a physical representation of ourselves. And so we manifest this in order to journey, learn, hopefully increase our wisdom on the earth plane. But, once we've proven that, Great Aunt Lydia is just fine, and we have clear evidence, undeniable evidence that it's her that's communicating and that she's doing well, at that point, clients become most interested in their lives. What's going on with their relationship, or what should they be doing for a living? What's the best profession for their children, etc., etc. And I was convinced, even as a kid, that there must be a system that enables us to decipher what's occurring on the earth plane. And so I spent many years researching different forms of astrology, and I found that astrology as practiced varies hugely in quality. If you look at the horoscope in the newspaper, it's generally useless. And even when it comes to professional astrology, there are different forms or sort of schools of thought in astrology, some of them far less useful than others. But basically, the study of planetary movement is astronomy. Astrology addresses the question, or answers the question, well, what does this mean? And if you speak to somebody that's skeptical about astrology, be understanding, be sympathetic, because we're not educated. Our education systems don't teach us the full picture by any means. They don't teach us the truth about nature and astrology, which is nature. So don't be too hard on people when they say that they think astrology is rubbish. Explain to them, it's not their fault that they don't know anything about the subject, and that if they study good astrology, they will be very confident that it's extremely valid and extremely useful. J.P. Morgan, not a man that I am particularly fond of, but he said astrology, he said millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. And they do. We're told, aren't we, knowledge is power, and this is true. So if you were extremely powerful and you wanted to hoard resources or maintain your position of strength or control over others, then you would want to retain knowledge so that you have a very clear and powerful strategic advantage. And this is probably one of the reasons why we're not educated on the subject of astrology. But as I said, it's undeniable. You know, saying that we don't believe in astrology is pretty much as stupid as saying we don't believe in mathematics or we don't believe in music. I mean, you just can't say it. It just is, just like math and like music. And the fact is that astrology describes, or a good astrology, a good interpretation, an accurate interpretation of planetary conditions and movements, it can be used to describe everything that is occurring on Earth, you know, and it's an extremely useful tool. I'm producing at the moment a series of virtual classes. I've been teaching for a long time, but I'm about to launch some really good new class material, and much of it's video based, but I'm very excited about it. And I'm probably going to give the first class away for free, simply because it'll help people to better understand astrology, and hopefully it will pique their interest in astrology, whether they study with me or they study themselves or elsewhere. It's all good. Just be aware that you need to choose a very good form of astrology, an accurate form of astrology. You have to be very discerning when it comes to the books, materials, resources that you choose. And there's a lot of good information on my website, which is stephenframpton.com. It's Stephen with a V. Frampton is FRAMPTON.com. And that's being overhauled at the moment as well, so there'll be a lot more on there. But one of the things I will say in the first video class, which will be better than this, I mean, basically it's been a long, hard week, and I'm just putting together this video for clients that are subscribed to my monthly monitoring service, and I'll explain that a little in a moment. But the videos that I'll produce in future will be much flashier, much more fun. This is basically me talking as I review the chart that you can see, and I'll look at it. I'll refer to a couple of other charts as well. But in the first class, I think one of the things I'll explain is that if you think of a traditional clock face with the hour hand and the minute hand, these are two cycles. We're observing two cycles. And so we say, well, what time is it? And we answer the question. As I speak right now, it's 12:29 a.m. on June the 1st. So there you go, that's the time, but what does it mean? It doesn't. The time doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't really. It doesn't tell you what's occurring in itself. And if you think of a traditional clock face with the hand, the two hands, the hour hand and the minute hand, now think of a clock face that has more hands, more cycles. So if you look at this chart, and I'll start moving around the cursor a little bit and pointing to certain things. If you look at this chart here, we've got the planets here on the inside of the wheel. And these are literally the planets at the time of the new moon, which was May 25th, at 3:44 p.m. Eastern Time. This is where the planets were positioned up in the sky. Theoretically, you can look at the positioning of the planets up in the sky there and read what's occurring. So I'm going to give some sky lectures soon, in which I'll actually give readings by pointing out, pointing up to the heavens. So this is very real, and again we're looking at a number of different cycles or different hands on the clock. So imagine here, this is Mars. Well, we're looking at the cycle of Mars. So Mars is one of the hands on the clock. Here's the Sun at 4 degrees. You see 4 degrees of Gemini. This is the cycle of the Sun. That's another hand on the clock. So think of it a little bit like a clock. The difference is this clock, the astrological clock or the zodiacal clock, actually explains not only what time it is, but what's occurring. And that is very real. That enables us to understand everything and anything that's occurring on the Earth plane, whether that's in a nation, the planet as a whole, or the life, the past, the present, the future for an individual, a person on the Earth plane. And people are usually surprised when I explain that a lot of my work now is consulting for organizations, because really good astrology can be used to predict stocks, weather systems, elections, stock market indices, you name it. Geopolitics, when will two nations get into conflict? And I always say, you can watch the news, and I'm very interested in current affairs, partly because it's an important part of my work to know what's going on. But you don't get the truth necessarily, so you watch the news, or hopefully you look at a number of different sources and try and figure out where the truth lies. And the answer is it's hard to get to. But if you ask the heavens, if you look at the astrology of it, you'll get the truth. You can't hide from the honesty and accuracy of really good analytical astrology. Anyway, so all of that said, this video is a simple video, but I produce this for the clients I have that are subscribed to my monthly monitoring service. So in this video, I give an outlook. It's like a weather forecast. We're looking at the energetic weather forecast for the month of June 2017 in this case. And so my clients get this file, and they listen to my explanation and interpretation of the planetary conditions and movements for the month at hand. And then they have a second file which is it's specific to them and their lives, their charts. So we're looking in practical terms of what's going on in their month, and that is designed to give them really good quality information and timing, so that they can avoid challenges but also be ready, poised to embrace good opportunities. But I tend to share this file, and you'll see in future I'll do a much sort of flashier form of production. But let's get started. So this is the chart for the new moon in May, as I said, and I start with this chart because the new moon chart is a chart indicating the outlook for that lunar cycle, right? It's from the new moon late May to the new moon late June, and basically we start by considering the quality of the different planets involved. Okay, so if you want to learn about astrology, or even if you have been studying astrology, I think that you'll find this explanation useful. People say, oh, astrology is so complex, it's so difficult. It really isn't. The problem is it can be very confusing if it's not explained well. So let me tell you some of the basics. And these are basics that apply to, your analysis or understanding of any chart. But we're going to use this chart, right? So basically, each planet has its basic nature, just as you have your basic nature, right? So the fact is, Jupiter wants to bring good fortune, abundance. Saturn is Jupiter's opposite. Saturn wants to bring limitations, austerity, adversity. And we feel that that's a bad thing, but actually if you think about it, you generally increase in wisdom through the challenges in life, the tough things that you have to work through, right? We don't necessarily become far wiser because of the vacation we had at the beach. And so we have to look at this philosophically, spiritually. But anyway, the basic nature of Jupiter is to help you out, to bring you just some good luck. And Saturn is the opposite. Venus is like a half dose of Jupiter. We call Venus the minor benefic. So think of benefic as in benevolence, benefit, bon, bien, buono. And Jupiter is the major benefic, a double dose of Venus. Saturn is the major malefic. So think of malefic, malicious, malevolent, malo. And Mars works for Saturn. Mars is a half dose of Saturn, so we call Mars the minor malefic. So Mars is Venus's opposite, and vice versa, just as Jupiter is Saturn's opposite, and vice versa. And again, as I said, remember that each planet has its basic nature. Now, there are 12 signs of the zodiac, and you should see those as different environments, okay? So when you take a planet and you put it in a different sign of the zodiac, it's going to function differently. Just as if you were to put yourself in a very different environment, you would function differently, okay? And that's a very important thing to remember with astrology, to understand the basic nature of each planet, and to remember that each planet functions differently depending on the sign of the zodiac, and also where it is within a sign. And I'll get into that in a little more detail in a moment. So, remember, for example, that when a planet is under the sign of the zodiac it rules, it's pretty happy because it's at home. So, Venus this month is going to move into Taurus. Let's use that example. So we begin June, today, June the 1st, Venus is at 25 degrees of Aries. Well, Aries is not a sign that Venus enjoys. Aries is not an environment that Venus feels comfortable in. And so Venus doesn't do well in Aries. And things ruled by Venus in the world don't fare very well with Venus in Aries. But on the 6th of June, Venus moves into Taurus. So you can see here's Venus there. She was at 19 degrees of Aries at the time of the new moon. And you can see that once she gets up here and crosses this line, this boundary line, into the sign or environment of Taurus, she's at home. She rules Taurus, she's a nice planet, and she's going to be much nicer when she's in her own sign of Taurus. And she will remain in Taurus through the end of the month and into July. Okay? So the point I'm trying to make again here is that you want to look at the condition or quality of the planet in question. Okay? So let me give you some other examples. Right. So this new moon on the 25th of May was in Gemini. Right? So the new moon occurs when the moon is at the same point in the zodiac as the sun. Right? So the moon is on the side of the Earth, in the same point in the zodiac as the sun. So zodiacally, she reaches the very heart of the sun. When any planet is right in the heart of the sun, it is hugely empowered, hugely strengthened, and that's why we refer to the new moon as good, as positive, as benefic. So you see here the moon reaching the center, the heart of the sun. That's the new moon. The full moon occurs when the moon is opposite the sun. Now, the sun is hugely powerful. So anything that's in opposition to the sun is afflicted, is damaged. So you have to remember that whenever you see a planet that's opposed by the sun, that's a problem. But the new moon is benefic because the moon, as I said, reaches the heart of the sun. But the interesting thing about this, the new moon in Gemini, is that the sun and the moon are what we call peregrine in Gemini. So the sun doesn't rule Gemini, the moon doesn't rule Gemini, and basically neither of them have dignity or quality in Gemini. So as I said, when Venus is going to be in Taurus, and she rules Taurus, so she has what we call dignity, quality. She has dignity of rulership in Taurus, which is a good thing. But the sun and the moon are just sort of lost in Gemini, just wandering sort of aimlessly, and that is what we mean when we refer to a planet that's peregrine. So this lunar cycle is not a lunar cycle that begins with a powerful, well-directed sun or a powerful, well-directed moon. Now, the next new moon, which is the 24th of June, is a different case, because that's the new moon in Cancer, and the moon rules Cancer, so she will have dignity of rulership. She's a good quality moon, very different thing, okay? So just think of quality. You go to the store, you buy a cake, and it's really good. It's quality. Or you go to the store, you buy a cake, and you're disappointed it's not good at all. And we also consider power, or the strength of the planet. So a planet can have lots of quality or dignity, but be weak. Can't do a lot. A planet can be in a really nasty condition, but powerful. So these are very different things, and we're always interested in quality as well as strength or power. But we're not going to talk really about strength or power in this case, in this video. We just haven't got time. We're going to focus primarily on quality. Now, I'll give you another example. So, if you look here at Mercury, there we go. Mercury is at 10 degrees of Taurus in the new moon chart for May 25th. Now, Mercury doesn't rule Taurus, but there are different forms of dignity. So I said that a planet in its own sign has dignity of rulership. When a planet is under a sign of the zodiac that's opposite the sign that it rules, so when a planet is under a sign of the zodiac opposite the one it rules, the planet is in its detriment, not happy. It's not in good condition. Fish out of water, foreign environment. And there are other levels of dignity or other considerations of quality in the form of astrology that I practice. So actually Mercury has what we call dignity of term at 10 degrees of Taurus. So I actually look at the dignities. We look at dignity of rulership. We look at what we call dignity of term. The terms are another way of breaking down the zodiac into segments. And we have also dignity of triplicity, which is to do with the element, earth, fire, air, water. And also there's consideration of what's called dignity of decan, but it's not a very powerful or form of dignity really, so it's not of huge importance. But really, if we look at the lineup this month, I'm going to say that the planets are not really in great shape. Okay, so if we go through it, I've said that the Sun in Gemini is, or sort of 4 degrees of Gemini, is peregrine, lost, just sort of wandering around aimlessly. The Moon at 4 degrees of Gemini is the same. Mercury in Taurus, as I said, has what we call dignity of term, but that's it, nothing else. Venus in Aries is miserable. She's in her detriment. She has no dignity at all there at 19 degrees of Aries. Mars here at 23 degrees of Gemini has dignity of term, which is okay, but I'd much rather see a highly dignified Mars. Jupiter here, you can see Jupiter, it's like the number 4 with the sort of curly or curved back. At 13 degrees of Libra, well, Jupiter has what we call dignity of triplicity in Libra, which is a good form of dignity. So Jupiter's not bad at all there. And then our friend Saturn down here, who's retrograde, means he's seemingly from the Earth, moving backwards a little in the zodiac, which is always an impediment, right? I mean, don't generalise, because people will get their knickers in a twist about Mercury being retrograde. Let's all stay at home and not work, not communicate, not negotiate, not sign contracts, etc. because Mercury's retrograde. Mercury retrograde can be extremely useful for certain things, and we shouldn't generalise, because you've got many considerations like, are you ruled by Mercury? If you and your body are ruled by Mercury, then we're really quite interested in Mercury. If you're not, then it's less of a consideration. So we have to always look at context, and not generalise. But again, although retrogradation of a planet can be useful in certain ways, analytically, we should remember that retrogradation is an impediment. We would prefer to see a planet moving direct forward in the zodiac than backwards. Okay, but Saturn at 25 degrees of Sagittarius is it's not a bad Saturn. I mean, Saturn has dignity of triplicity there, dignity of term there, and dignity of deacon. At the end of this year, in December, Saturn will move into his own sign of Capricorn, and he'll have dignity of rulership. So he'll be in even better shape, far better shape there. But we still have to remember that he's the major malefic, and that's his basic nature. And that's always his basic nature. But he'll function and express himself a little differently depending on his dignity. So let's take a look at what's going on during the month. Let's take a look at the highlights. So let me explain how you can bring this to life in your own chart. So here we've got the new moon chart. And actually, let me show you this chart here is it's also the new moon. It was supposed to be today, but it's not. So we'll just stick with this one. What you want to do is this. You want to say to yourself, okay, so Saturn, for example, here is at 25 degrees of Sagittarius, or was at the time of the new moon, the beginning of the lunar cycle. Well, where is that in my chart? So if your ascendant, the point in the chart that rules or describes you and your body, is in Sagittarius, then Saturn, the major malefic, is under your rising sign. He's focused upon you. Now, there are many other considerations, but this is the starting point. So if you have your house of finances, personal finances, the second house in Sagittarius, then Saturn in that house will be, he's doing his work upon your personal finances. And Saturn moves quite slowly. It takes him a couple of years, or more, usually a couple of years or more actually, in a sign, because it takes him about 29 and a half-ish years to cycle the zodiac. And you want to keep an eye on the slow-moving planets, because Saturn, for example, is the major malefic. You have to understand your relationship with Saturn. So in your natal chart, what's the condition of Saturn? Is Saturn actually in relatively good condition, in which case you've got a better or more constructive relationship with Saturn? That will always determine or predispose the way Saturn behaves towards you in life, whatever he's doing in your life. If you've got really lousy Saturn, then you've got a really lousy Saturn. I have a really lousy Saturn. And there are ways of appeasing the planets. There are ways of working with them, okay? And we have enormous free will. So people say to me, hey, so if the planetary movements are just what they are, they can't be changed, then do I have any free will? Is there any point in me trying? And I would say, well, you can't do anything about the planetary movements. You can't change your natal chart. It is what it is. But you can choose to be the best version of yourself. You can make good decisions, or you can make awful decisions. So we have an enormous amount of free will. And really, the way things turn out is a combination of our free will, or the extent to which we sort of purified or improved ourselves in the way we function, combined with the nature of your natal chart and the nature of the planetary conditions, etc., at a point in time. And I don't look only at transiting planets. You see, here we're looking at the planets up in the sky as they transit, as they orbit the sun. But really good astrology involves using many other techniques to gather insight. So if you're using astrology or learning astrology, please remember that the transits in your chart or in any chart in the life of any entity are sort of surface level, and you've really got to dig much deeper than that to really understand what's going on. I like to say that you'll find that the transiting planets will trigger underlying conditions, but they don't describe the underlying conditions. You've got to dig in and determine what the underlying conditions are to see what you're dealing with, to see what the transiting planets are likely to trigger as they move through your chart. But again, you want to monitor the planetary movements, and so if let's put it like this: if your rising sign is Libra, then you've got Jupiter on your side at the moment. Through the summer this year, Jupiter's in Libra. Jupiter moves into Scorpio in October. So wherever Libra is in your chart, whether it's your children, your relationship, your love life, your work, your friends, your personal finances, wherever Jupiter is, you've got that sort of positive, expansive energy of Jupiter at work at this time. Now, you also have to remember that you've got to look at context, as I said. So if, for example, Jupiter is on top of or transiting on top of your worst planet, then Jupiter could well be expanding a problem. So Jupiter brings abundance, sort of opens things up, makes them unfold, or makes them expansive. So again, you want to look at context, because if Jupiter's on top of your lousiest planet, then that's not necessarily going to be a great thing. But it's not as simple as that. You've got to dig into detail. But anyway, let me give you some of the sort of highlights for the month. So you can see here that Mars at the time of the new moon was at 23 degrees of Gemini, in opposition to Saturn. An opposition is never good. An opposition means you've got two things, two characters, two very real entities pulling in different directions. So here you've got malefic Mars in a tug of war with malefic Saturn. So that's a challenge. But obviously Mars moves out of that opposition, and in actual fact by now is out of the opposition. In fact, the chart for June 1st, okay, and one of the features here is that Venus, unhappy in Aries, moves over the same point in the zodiac as the planet Uranus. So on the 3rd of June, Venus will be conjunct Uranus. And so we get then this theme of a pretty unhappy, agitated Venus, impacted by oddball, quirky, disruptive, comes at you from nowhere, Uranus. And this is in an aspect also to Saturn. So on that day, June the 3rd, we all need to be careful with regard to things of Venus. It's probably a very bad day to tell your partner that you love them a little bit less because they forgot to record your favourite TV show. Or it's a very bad day to be jealous, because we've got this theme of Venus, love and romance and joy, but she's not in good condition and she's disrupted by Uranus. So you challenge a person too much, they can fly off the handle at you. So not the best day to discuss any challenges in relationships, that kind of thing. Mars is still loosely in opposition to Saturn, which is a problem because an opposition puts two things at odds. with each other. So again, that's quite a contentious, conflicted aspect, and we all need to be mindful of that. You know, it's not a great time to be too forceful, to be uncompromising. It's just not a good time to get into a fight. Okay. Now, one of the things that does happen this month is that Jupiter here, and you can see Jupiter's retrograde, Jupiter on the 10th of June goes direct. And this is a good thing because the planet of good fortune, Jupiter, is going to be changing direction and moving forward rather than being impeded by retrograde motion. So this is good. And I've seen some really nice things with regard to Jupiter going direct in my clients' charts, such as Jupiter going direct on the cusp of a person's house of personal finances. That's going to be positive for them and their personal finances. And if they have a really good relationship with Jupiter and other considerations in the chart are positive or look positive financially, then it's going to be really nice. So check where Jupiter is in your chart, or check what you've got going on at 13 degrees of Libra, and know that on the 10th of June, Jupiter, the major benefic, planet of good fortune and abundance, is going to be helping you out in that area of life. The Sun is moving from 11 degrees of Gemini at the beginning of the month into Cancer on the 21st. Around that time every year, that's what happens. The Moon, obviously, is going to cycle through the zodiac. Mercury will go from 20 degrees of Taurus, moving into Gemini here on the 7th of June, right through Gemini, and moving into the sign Cancer on the 21st, finishing the month at 19 degrees of Cancer. Now, you can see here at the moment on June 1st, Mars is at 27 degrees of Gemini. But what's going to happen here is that Mercury is going to catch up with Mars. Now, when Mercury catches up with Mars, which is the 28th of June, Mars will be in Cancer. And Mars doesn't really like being in Cancer. Mars doesn't detest that sign because it's a water sign, and Mars quite likes a water sign. But still, you've got not a great Mars, excuse me, and Mercury will transit that point on the 28th. And really, you want to be aware of that a day or two before, and even a day afterwards. So what does it mean? Well, Mars is malefic. Mars is the planet of conflict and accidents and aggressions. Mars also is associated with illness, and Mercury will transit Mars. So if you are ruled by Mercury, you might not feel particularly great that day. So you take care of yourself around that time. Make sure that you don't get under the weather. So if your ascendant, the part of the chart that rules you in your body, is in a sign ruled by Mercury, so Virgo or Gemini, then you want to be aware of that Mercury transit over Mars. In terms of the world generally, Mercury is news, the media, journalism, lawyers, teachers, transportation, and Mercury's also symbolic of children. So we need to really look out for our kids at that time to make sure that they don't get into trouble. And it's an important time to make sure that kids are kept safe, because Mars is malefic in his basic nature. Now there's another interesting thing that's happening this month that enables me to explain the concept of cazimi and combustion. So you can see here Mercury at 20 degrees of Taurus. Now Mercury is going to reach the Sun. So let's see exactly when that conjunction is. So on the 20th of June, Mercury will reach 28 degrees of Gemini, and the Sun will be at 29 degrees of Gemini. Now, when a planet is near to the Sun, it's damaged. It's the worst form of affliction. You don't want to get too close to the Sun. We all like a bit of sunshine, but we don't want to be too exposed to the Sun. It's going to give us problems. And it's the same in astrology. Any planet that's near to the Sun is damaged. And it's the, as I said, the worst form of affliction, arguably. There's an exception, which is when a planet is right in the heart of the Sun. That's called cazimi. So when a planet's near to the Sun, that's combustion. Not good. But if you're right in the heart of the Sun, then that is cazimi. And cazimi is excellent. So we're going to have a cazimi Mercury. Mercury under his own sign of Gemini, cazimi, which is a very good thing. So we can say, let's see, Mercury Mercury is in Cancer on the 21st of June, the day that the Sun moves into Cancer as well. So that's a day really of a cazimi Mercury. That can be a great day to study, a great day to write, a great day to reflect, to make plans, to communicate, okay, or to do a deal. To teach something or give a presentation, that kind of thing. So that's something that's nice, that's positive, okay. And I'll talk you through the other sort of highlights for the month, okay. But again, you've got to remember that this all has to be looked at in the context of the chart in question. So your chart or your partner's chart or your boss's chart or your client's chart, etc. And I'll give you a rundown now of some key dates for June. So I mentioned that on the 3rd, Venus will be at the same point in the zodiac as Uranus, and that's disruptive for Venus. So if you're ruled by Venus, or someone that's important in your life is ruled by Venus, you want to be a little bit careful around them there. Let's see. The Sun on the 4th is going to be in a discordant or an obstacle aspect to Neptune. Now the Sun is authority figures. The Sun is symbolic of men. The Sun is also sort of symbolic of status, and so really the 4th of June is not the great day to tell your boss he's being an asshole, because it's not going to work out well on that day, because the discordant aspect between the Sun and Neptune really blurs the picture and can create confusion and disillusionment with anything relating to the Sun. So check where Neptune is in your chart and check the 4th of June. All right. The 6th of June is nice in many ways because Venus, planet of love, of luxuries, of nice things, she moves into Taurus, which is great. And actually on that day, Mercury, communication, etc., moves into Gemini, and Mercury rules Gemini. So that's quite nice. Then on the The 9th, we have the full moon. Remember that the full moon occurs when the moon is on the farther side of the earth. So you've got the moon and then the earth, and then on the other side of the earth, the sun. So they're lined up that way, and the sun is in the middle, which means that the moon is at a point in the zodiac that's exactly opposite the sun. And that's not good. That's an affliction, always. So full moon, as a rule of thumb, you've got to say is malefic. So we're careful around the full moon. We know that hurricanes are far more catastrophic under a full moon. We know that there's more violence. We know that many police forces and many hospitals, etc., emergency services staff up at the time of full moon. We know that we bleed more under a full moon. So, it's never good to have surgery under a full moon because it's more difficult to make the blood clot. And these are just facts. Now, if we need emergency surgery, then let's get it done. But it's not a great day or a great time to schedule elective surgery. Okay, so as I said, that's the full moon, and it's the full moon in Sagittarius. If my memory serves me correctly, then it's 18 degrees of Sagittarius. Let's see. Yeah, full moon, 18 degrees of Sagittarius. So if your ascendant is 18 degrees of Sagittarius, that's particularly sensitive for you, right? As you want to look after yourself. If your natal moon, your emotions, your impulses, your reactions, your mood is at 18 degrees of Sagittarius, be careful because you could be in a foul mood or you could react badly that day. Equally, if your Mars, your natal Mars is at that point, you could feel aggressive or agitated that day or conflicted. You could get into an argument. So be aware of where it falls in your particular chart. And let's see, the 13th of June, I would say we've got to be careful again with communications, all things of Mercury. Mercury's in a positive aspect to Jupiter, which can make us sort of confident and assertive in communication. But at the same time, she's in an obstacle aspect, a discordant aspect to Neptune. So communication can be confusing and misunderstood and very sort of blurry and foggy. So we've got to be careful there. On June the 15th, the Sun is in exact opposition to Saturn. So again, we've got to be careful how we assert ourselves, and how we approach authority figures or challenge other people. It's really not a good day to be challenging somebody, to be honest. Then on the 18th, which is Father's Day in the US, Mercury will be in opposition to Saturn. So again, it's not a good day to be having a difficult conversation, or I personally would not be choosing that day to negotiate a contract or sign important paperwork. Now, the 20th of June is interesting. It's the summer solstice, isn't it? When the Sun is moving into Cancer. Venus is in a positive aspect to Neptune. Mercury's in a positive aspect to Uranus. So, play your cards right. The 20th, 21st could be a good day. Okay. Now, I want to tell you something that's really interesting about the Sun. So, let's talk about December for a moment. So you know that the Sun in the height of summer in the northern hemisphere is at his highest point above the equator. So in the northern hemisphere we have most light, most warmth, most sun. That's the summer solstice. 21st of December, the Sun reaches the lowest point below the equator. It's called declination. The position of the Sun with regard to the equator. So on December 21st every year, the Sun reaches his lowest declination. It doesn't go any further south than that. But he doesn't begin at that point his gradual journey back up towards the equator. He just sits there for 3 days. And he does this on the constellation of the Southern Cross. So the sun dies on the cross and is resurrected 3 days later. Happens every year. And this is why we offer gifts at Christmas. We're celebrating the fact that the Son has been resurrected. The Son is now beginning his slow journey, very predictable journey, back up towards the equator. And we offer gifts because we're celebrating that there will be abundance. There will be more food, there will be more warmth, there'll be life, etc. Now, this doesn't mean that Jesus Christ doesn't exist. He absolutely does. The energy of Jesus Christ is fully available to us if we choose. So Jesus Christ is a wonderful role model for us, and there are other wonderful role models for us, just as there are dreadful role models for us, and we're each constantly choosing what we want to be, what version of ourselves we want to be. But this point about the sun is very important because astrology is everywhere in everything, and wise people know all about it, and many of the sort of traditions, or all of the traditions, in fact, all of the holidays, for example, that we have, they're astrological. They all have astrological significance. The Declaration of Independence was signed deliberately on a particular day. Benjamin Franklin was a pretty skilled astrologer, and other founding fathers were skilled astrologers as well. They knew what they were doing, and they didn't do these things just randomly. But anyway, let's look at some other considerations. So we've got the new moon on the 21st of June. That's a good day to do a little ritual or something about what you want to create moving forward. It's in your garden, it's the time to sow seeds, isn't it? You create, you sow at new beginnings at the time of the new moon, and at the full moon you let go, right? And I really enjoy gardening, and I do everything astrologically. So there are all these fascinating rules and guidelines about what you do when, based upon the moon and what she is conducive to. So again, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, this is nature, right? I feel that we need to be a little careful on June the 24th because we can feel particularly passionate about things, but also we can be quite sort of determined and conflicted at the same time. So we've got to handle ourselves well on June 24th, June 25th. And I would say actually even the 26th, we've got to be careful that action we take is well thought through, and that we're not just sort of being idealistic or too sort of determined, too forceful, too quick to take action. We've got to be careful with that. And in terms of decision making and communication, we need to be careful June 27th, 28th, 29th as well. So, I hope that this gives you a good understanding, or some understanding of not only astrology, good astrology. I mean, I've really tackled the tip of the iceberg there, because we could spend hours and hours talking just about the new moon chart. But I hope that you found it useful. I hope that it enables you to or it gives you a sort of platform for your personalized monthly monitoring report if you receive that from me. And if you're just listening to this because you're interested in astrology, then I hope that you found it useful as well. Again, I personally believe that astrology is really very accessible to everybody if it is explained or taught well, and if it's a really good, pure form of analytical astrology, and that the very, very important sort of foundation stones of understanding are put in place. So, as I said, we must look at the condition of each planet in the natal chart or in any chart. We consider the aspects that they form to each other, and we have to understand the basic nature or desire of each planet as well. So, it is, I don't like to say it's complex, it is intricate, let's say. And it's absolutely fascinating because you can decode anything with really good astrology. And there are different forms of astrology. You can just ask a question and pull a chart, and if you know how to decipher the chart, you're going to get a very, very specific and correct answer, accurate answer to your question. And I actually believe that we shouldn't graduate from school without a very good understanding of astrology, because if everybody had access to good astrology for themselves and used it with integrity, people would be far happier, far more successful, and the world would be a much better place. We would avoid many problems, and we would be focused upon opportunities. So there you go. I'm going to leave it at that because it's now 1:26 a.m. and time for me to get some sleep before work in the morning. But I hope you found that useful, and if you have any questions about your monthly monitoring report, just let me know. You can text me, call me 865-456-4271 in the US. And actually, I'll give you a heads up, my number's going to change in the not too distant future, because I can't always sort of handle the volume of calls and messages. But don't stop contacting me if you need me. I don't want to discourage anybody, but I'm going to have a free phone number and an answering service to schedule consultations, just so that that's sort of handled and I can stay focused primarily on doing my work. I do have help, but it's still pretty busy, pretty hectic. And also, check out my website if you haven't before, stephenframpton.com. I have some good material on YouTube as well, Stephen Frampton, and I'm in Facebook. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, even Pinterest. And if you would like to contact me, my email address is inquiries, which is with an I, at stephenframpton.com. And again, just as a reminder, I've got a lot of new classes, face-to-face and virtual, coming up. I'm going to be relaunching my class, How to Create a Thriving Spiritual Business, and share a lot of information in that about how to create a thriving spiritual business, if that's what you would like to do. I'm also going to be teaching my quantum self-discovery program, live and virtually. It's a really good class. I have a new version of that which will be quantum business discovery as well, which is for people that want to really thoroughly understand themselves and then create a business on as they move forward. And it's going to be very practical. I take a very analytical, very sort of academic approach to my work, but I believe in bringing value to people, and that means being practical, and I try very much to take a very, very practical approach so that the work I do is really useful for my clients. I have a documentary series in the pipeline as well. The first documentary will be about the Great Pyramid, the truth about the Great Pyramid, and I have lots of new services and other tools and classes coming out soon as well. So if you want to know about those things in advance, just sign up for my blog. You can do that at my website, stephenframpton.com. So all of that said, thank you, and I hope that you have a great month. Look after yourselves, and all the best.